What is up, group members? I'm licensed psychologist Dr. J.
I'm licensed clinical social worker Kristen Gingrich.
I'm licensed psychologist Dr. Kristen Casey.
And I'm licensed psychologist Dr. Jessica Rabon.
Woo! The gang is back together, all sleep deprived because we're up all night on threads.
Guys, it's a problem.
It's so addicting.
Some people will be threading mid-podcast, so watch their eyes. Call them out, please, in the comments. But we're going to be talking all about emerging adulthood. We're going to hear directly from KBI, who's still within that frame, and talking about who's the furthest away from it. So settle in, take a seat, and welcome to group therapy. Last week, I was out saving the world, is how we're going to put that. But it was such an awesome episode. I did listen to it. And yes, I do yell a lot. I can't help it. I probably could if I tried, but I'm not going to. But it was a great, great episode. And we left you with this reflection question. How might you learn, or have you learned, from people who are different than you? A couple really cool reflections here. One, I did therapy dog work with children on the spectrum, most nonverbal around pre-K age. And I did it at a point in my own healing and recognized the trauma I experienced very early on. Very reflective.
It's perfect. That's cool.
Another person said, I like to use employee resource groups at work to network with people whose lived experiences differ from mine.
I love it.
Love those. Love that. Gosh, I missed you guys. I hate to admit it because I've been chatting with you through threads nonstop. I feel like our group chat has just moved to threads now.
That was me last night where I was like, guys, it's like 10 o'clock at night. And I'm like, whatever you're doing. It wasn't 10. It was like, what, like 9? I'm like, do it. Sign up now. Get on it.
It was like, oh my God, like stop yelling at me.
It was a compassionate yelling. Is what that was. And we all jumped on and we're there. And we won't know if Threads is cool until we hear from Gen Z completely.
Yeah.
And they happen to fall in that emerging adult range.
They do.
Can we even define that? I mean, KBI, is that you at the fresh 22 years old?
Am I the youngest one on this podcast?
Oh,
yes.
By far.
I know that Justin is old enough to be my dad. Honestly, I can see the gray hairs peeking through.
I mean, I do use Just for Men, so there's.
It's over. You're old. It's over. Wait, do you wear like noobs, like New Balances to go mow the lawn and stuff? Like, are you like full dad mode?
I wear green Crocs, which I think is far worse.
Way better. I think it's better because you could add. You could add
white
pins
socks?
to Crocs. Yeah, white socks.
Do you wear white socks up to your shin?
Sometimes.
I quite believe that I could be the only one who is still in the quote unquote age range, though.
Yeah.
Which is, so there's two. So a lot of places say 18 to 25. And then the young adult is 18 to 31, which I am 31. So I'm just on the edge. I don't know if anybody else is. I don't know how old anybody is. Justin doesn't even want to. Justin is AARP level at this point.
I applied. I'm waiting to hear back. We're right.
Keep us updated. Tell us on Threads so we all know and everybody else says. Yeah.
We'll celebrate it.
Yeah.
Usually like that emerging adulthood is those ages at 18 to 25 where we are really coming into our own. There is a lot of change happening. You are kind of essentially like, I remember being like 18 to 25 and remembering being like, I'm being told I'm an adult, but like, what is life?
Keep looking around like, who's really the adult in the room?
Right? Like that really messy time period where there is, so much change happening. We're learning about ourselves. We're learning who we want to be, what we want to do. And just, it's really messy and uneasy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know Arnett came up with the term, I think it was like 2000. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. So this term really only came out in the past 23 years. And I know that Arnett described really 5 major struggles during emerging adulthood. So like identity struggles, instability, being self-focused, this feeling of like in-betweenness, like exactly what you described, KBI. Like I'm being told I'm an adult, but like I'm not really an adult. And as well as new possibilities. So when I think of that, like, you know, I know all of us here went to college, but you know, what am I going to major in? What are my career goals going to be? What jobs am I going to have throughout that time period? Things like that. Like you're out of high school. So, you know, there's so many possibilities, relationships, careers, family, travel, all of those things.
And a lot of times they conflict. Like if your friends are going away to college and just say, you don't really want to go to college, there's like this weird like feeling of like, am I doing it right? Like, what's the right thing to do? Your parents might be telling you something, your friends might be telling you something, you might be telling yourself something, and you're like, what do I do? And it's just, it feels like how I capture it is like, it just feels like the most chaotic time because there's no real rule book to navigate it. But you constantly kind of feel lost in some sense.
Well, and it's kind of like I'm supposed to know everything, but I know nothing. Like I remember being 21 and like, you know, feeling like I had to make these huge decisions for like my life, but like also being like, I don't even know how to balance a checkbook.
Yeah.
I mean,
Does anybody know how to balance a checkbook? That's millennial or younger.
No,
they do it automatically online. Like,
do people even keep checkbooks? Like, I just look at my charges and I'm like, oh, that's not right.
I do have a checkbook.
Do you really? Mm-hmm. You have to like keep it as like an ancient artifact for when we age, you know?
But it's literally for like very specific things. Like when we bought our house, I like wrote a check, or like before we bought the house, like. No, I guess my rent was automatic. Like there were very specific things I had to write checks for, but it's very rarely used.
Somehow I believe that and don't believe that. But it's funny in me thinking about this age range, and it's like you're trying to collect experiences, and yet there's a lot of things in life people want you to have experience to get. Like it's like we want you to have 10 years experience for this entry level tech job, and you're like, I'm 23. What did you want me to
couldn't work at 13.
Yeah. Like, but I see the societal pressures and the hangups and the hurdles. But as I reflect back at that time period, there's no other way to go about it except collecting experiences. I'm
like making mistakes too, like a lot of them to figure out what you want to do. It's so, oh my God, it's like unnerving too. Cause I think you're hitting on a good point, Justin, of it's hard to gain mastery in like even just one thing, you know, unless you've had a sustained hobby, just like you like skateboarding or something and you've been doing that. But then it's like, do I do that for a career? Do I still like, it's just hard to decide. Yeah.
Well, and it's like that idea of like the decision that I'm making now, like, is this is supposed to be for the rest of my life?
Oh. And
like when we think about it, what's the average age range for adult Americans? What, like 70, 80?
Like you mean like when are they going to die?
Like life expectancy. Like
life expectancy.
What? Let's just go with 80, it. Right? Like that's like by the time you're only 1/8 through your life, you're supposed to be deciding what you're going to do for the next 7/8.
It's 77.28.
Yeah. So I'm pretty
I don't know why I whispered that. It just felt so dramatic. 77.28. 77 years old.
And even that feels like a myth of like,
it does.
I don't even feel that way now. Like, I think now that I'm really knocking on 40's door, I'm very much accepting the fact of like, I don't think I'll ever know what I'm going to do. It's just like you take it literally step by step. But when you're 23, it feels like a lot of heavy, big decisions. And again, this has just been my experience, but the longer I'm here, and it's a privilege to age for sure, the more I realize I'm like, you're just adapting in the moment and you're learning about yourself as you go. And this was another point I was thinking of. I'm like, it really does highlight like the privileges you have allow you to collect experiences, which allow you to know yourself better.
Wow.
Which is when you think about poverty, people who don't even have the opportunity to go to school or work various jobs, you just don't even get the chance to explore who am I? What do I like? What do I not like? We get into underfunded schools in the same way, but like it is a privilege to be able to experiment and figure out who the fuck we are.
Absolutely.
Oh, there goes the explicit tag on this episode.
You fucked it up.
And it was Justin.
I know.
Yeah. When I think about like identity, I think about, especially for individuals that do have the privilege to go to college or maybe even like move out for the first time, even if they're not going to college, their identity for many people is no longer within that family unit explicitly. Like if you are an individual that has lived with your parents or guardians until 17, 18 years old, and then you go off to college or you move out and you're finding yourself for the first time as a separate individual from your family unit. Even if you're super close with your family, like if you're no longer living with them, maybe you're living with roommates for the first time or things like that, and exploring like, who am I? What do I believe? Like now that I know for me, a big thing, you know, I moved from Massachusetts to South Carolina to go to college. That was culture shock within itself. But even just being exposed to new people with different ideas and beliefs, and then starting to question, like, do I just think or believe these things because that's how I was raised? And now I'm in this whole new different environment. And who am I? Who do I want to be?
Yeah. And it's hard to, I don't know. I just always I remember during that time just feeling like this weight of like not knowing and unpredictability and a lack of sense of control over my life, because there were just so many choice points. I had the privilege of having all those choice points, you know, and I had so many transitional phases in my younger years that I thought that that's just what life was like. So when emerging adulthood came, I was like, oh, I'm just doing it. But then my friends were telling me I have to decide on a career and I have to decide on what I want to do with my life. And then that got me thinking, and I'm like, shit, I have to have it all figured out right now. And I'm like 19 years old. Like, how am I supposed to know what I want to do for the rest of my life at 19, you know?
Well, and I think too, like kind of to take that too in a different direction as well, is for some individuals, emerging adulthood is the freedom. So for me, like when I left my parents' home, and luckily, like living with my dad was amazing, but like when I got to separate myself and I started getting to make the choices for me and doing that, like there was so much freedom in that. But sometimes at moments it did feel like a lot in the, oh my gosh, like I'm making these choices. Like I now have this immense like freedom, this ability to be myself, to be who I am, to make the changes that I want to make. You know, that also comes with this, because there's definitely immense struggles, but there's also so many amazing things that come with it as well.
I don't know why this thought popped into my head, KBI, when you're talking about, but like the freedom, I definitely felt that same way. I moved 1,000 miles away from my parents, got to make my own choices, but then it also like the responsibility, even though you're in the in-between, but I have this distinct memory of like having to buy toilet paper. And I know this is such a privileged statement, but I was like, oh my gosh, like I grew up in my parents' household and toilet paper was just, you know, my mom.
Oh my God, it's so like, true.
The cost of like living and toiletries and things like that, that I up till, I mean, I went off to college at 17 years old, had never like thought about like even like little responsibilities, oh gosh, I have to like figure out, you know, go to the store and buy toothpaste and toilet paper and
toilet
things
bowl
like
cleaner.
That. Exactly. Things
and
like
it clean itself.
No, exactly. But I think, and I agree, like the freedom can be really positive. And I think that speaks to that in between of like, I'm an adult, but not a real adult yet.
Yo, there is a viral meme going around.
That was the most white man comment I've ever heard in my life.
Listen to this meme real quick though. It says oh, I'm going to clean my shower. What am I going to do next? Give my car a ride into town? It said, grow up.
Wait, then I saw the thread. Did you hear the vacuum one? If you clean out your vacuum, are you the vacuum cleaner? What's happening?
These memes.
Are you the dishwasher?
This is a direct result of Threads, by the way.
We're going through dopamine withdrawal, so all we're doing is hyper focusing on what we've seen all day.
Oh my God, I can't breathe. Okay.
It's definitely because
But you know what? You may have not had to clean out a vacuum.
Totally, though. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Moved out and then realized maybe too late when your vacuum caught on fire.
I remember the first time when I was I don't even know how old I was. I was definitely not 18 or 19. I was definitely a junior or a senior in college. And I was at college and I was like, Dad, I need a doctor's appointment. Can you call and set it? He's like, Kristen, you're 21 years old. Call the doctor yourself. And I was like, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
There's a first time, though. There's
a first time for everything. Yeah.
Actually, joke's on you. My dad still makes my doctor's appointments.
Wow.
Wait, for real?
No.
Can he, I was going to say, can he make mine? Can we recruit him?
That might be a full-time job.
But that's the thing. It's those things. I remember being like, wait, how long has it been since I've been to the dentist?
Mm-hmm. It's so true.
Because I was like, because my dad's not making those appointments. Or like you said, Jess, how much, toilet bowl cleaner is how much?
Yeah.
It's that sense of what do they call it? Individuation, where you have to almost see the natural consequences of just being autonomous and on your own. And I just think about our listeners, and I think about obviously we're all mental health professionals. And if you're in emerging adulthood, and even not to take it in a different direction, but if you're experiencing mental health struggles during that time too, it's even more of a transition for you. You're not only trying to deal with depression, anxiety, whatever it is, plus try to figure out who you are, where you fit in the world, your belief systems. It's almost it's information overload too, I think. Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to judge somebody at what point you learn any one thing. But all of us, if you reflect right now, all of us in your early 20s, I know all examples have been thrown out, but I was a junior in college when one of my roommates taught me how to cook pasta. But I came from a family where it's we didn't have a lot of home cooked meals. Everyone was busy. Everyone worked really late. My mom was trying to go through school. I had no idea how to cook pasta. But there's some people at literally 10, and maybe that was you. You knew how to cook pasta, your mom, dad, somebody showed you. But it's easy to judge and be like, how do you not know this? Yeah. But the reality is, at some point, I feel for a lot of us in that emerging adulthood, we start to catch up or fill in certain gaps that maybe someone else had earlier. I bought toilet paper for myself before, but you've never made a doctor's appointment, or you don't know how to cook pasta. But I very much, when I think about this time period, I think it is about collecting all the experiences, not just an expertise for a career.
True.
Well, that's the difference between me and my brother. Me and my brother are 4 years apart. And I was the caretaker when we weren't with my dad. And so I was cooking. I was doing all of that. And I remember when my brother moved into his house when he was living independently, and he sent me a photo of stuffed shells that he made. And I go, who the fuck made those? And he goes, I didn't. I go, where'd you buy them from? And he goes, no, I made them with grandma's recipe. And I go,
what?
Let's go.
Did you burn the house down? Are you okay? Are you going to get food poisoning? It was this whole weird, but again, he never had to do that. Mm-hmm. And he made, it's and again, wild, as we grow up and we do things differently, we make different choices. We learn how to do things, especially if, they weren't taught to us as children, teens, young adults, and just how different that experience is for every single person, and how it's so hard to try not to compare yourself to other people because you really just don't know. Mm-hmm. Justin, you you say that, oh, I didn't know how to cook pasta because we were just so busy all the time. And then on my end, I knew how to cook pasta because my mom was not present. And that's so different in the experiences.
So different. I think about geographic location too. Sorry, Jess. Like if you, like growing up in New York City, like I never thought I'd ever drive a car. And then I moved to Jersey and all my friends were like, we're going to get our license. And I'm like, really? We're going to do this for real? But for me, I was like, okay, this is part of it. But one really quick funny story. I could make pasta from scratch. My mom is like one of the best cooks out there. Shout out to Donna. Makes the best Italian food. But I thought that Downy was actual detergent for but I didn't realize it was like not going to clean your, like I had no idea. Like I had no clue. I was like
the fabric softener.
I thought it was laundry detergent for the longest time. Nobody taught me how to do laundry, like nobody. So it was like me and my brother, and he's like, the clothes smell good, but they like feel weird. I'm like, yeah, I don't know what's going on. And he's like, maybe we got to find new stuff. So we're literally at Stop and Shop, me and him. We're so young. And I was like in the aisle and we're doing this together. I'm like 20 years old. And he's like 4 years younger than me. He's like, which one? So we literally asked somebody at Stop and Shop. We're like, yo, how do we do laundry? And this woman, bless her heart, Carol, I will never forget you. She literally taught us everything to do. She was a blessing, but like you only learn when you mess up sometimes, you know? Yeah, it was the cutest thing, but
no, I love that story. And it actually goes into what I was going to say, because all of you have highlighted different experiences and bringing it back to something you mentioned, K10, about like mental health struggles. If you then engage in that comparison game, like, you know, we're all laughing, reflecting, kind of joking around. But, you know, K10, if you weren't you, that could have been like super embarrassing for you. And, you know, if your friends knew how to do laundry, or like Justin, if you like were super embarrassed that you didn't know how to cook pasta or things like that, you know, depending on what you're going through, you may develop like internal sense of like being like a failure or behind your peers. And I also think of, you know, just that life transition phase probably increases risks for things like anxiety, depression. Because I think of, I don't know about y'all's experiences, but for me, since I moved so far away, like my relationships with my high school friends, like maybe the first semester we tried to keep in contact, but like I moved 1,000 miles away and knew nobody. I had no support system. And I feel like even if you don't move that far away, if people, you know, you graduate high school, if you do so and go into the next phase of life, like relationships change. You know, maybe you had a high school romantic relationship and then you go on different paths and there's a significant breakup, or friends kind of go down different paths. And the people you thought you would be friends with forever are no longer there for you. And so I just think of, you know, the lack of or changing social support, or just, you know, kind of all of those major struggles that we've already touched on, like not knowing who you are, the instability of, you know, what's going on. New possibilities can be a great thing, especially if you're privileged enough to have a lot of options. It also can be really anxiety provoking and overwhelming. So I think a lot of aspects of emerging adulthood could easily increase one's risk for mental health struggle, even if it's not clinically significant, but just like stress.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then, I mean, so far in my life, that was the time of greatest change, right? Because I'm collecting all these new experiences. I had the most amount of freedom, and you're changing so much, but yet you've known people like from high school, maybe even grade school. And it's hard because I think you even experience that for the first time of like, people can change through high school and sometimes they do, but I really think your 20s is where people change a lot.
Oh yeah.
And then you're left with, do I still relate to this person or connect, or like, are our values the same? And that's like, it's really hard. It could be a family member, like you had said, it could be somebody you've been dating for years. and you're trying to make a decision of like, who are you now? Who do you think you're transitioning into in different ways? And how does this person either walk that path with you, or you're going in two different directions? Like, I remember those tough choices and how intense that was back then.
It's so hard. I distinctly remember all of my friends went away to college and I didn't. So I stayed home to work. Cause my mom was like, you either have to get a job or like, we can't afford college. Like, it was just like one of those things. So I went to community college and all my friends left and I'm like, am I supposed to visit you? Do you visit me? Like, how are we supposed to do this? Like, I didn't know how to navigate it. You figure it out over time, but yeah, it's a really confusing time. And I think like, just managing the grief that comes along with those relationships, romantic or platonic, whatever it is. I mean, that's so hard, you know? Yeah.
Well, and it's even those pieces, right? When we manage that, everything, like the world keeps going forward. Whether you are the one who has left or the people who have left are like, and you're the one who stays and they're coming back. Like, that's what's so hard about it, is that everybody continues to grow. Like, I go home now and I'm like, I don't even know how to drive around my town because things are so different. And I look back, like, I think the hardest part about growing up is, in the term of social media, is Facebook memories at this point in my life.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, yeah. I deleted my Facebook because I don't want to see it. I just want to be reminded.
Stop, yeah.
I swear to God, yeah.
I look back at my memories when stuff comes back from like 2010, 2011, and I'm like, I'm an entirely different person because I grew, learned, changed, unlearned shit, like whatever. And I think that sometimes like that is so hard, especially when you learn, grow, and change in an opposite direction than your family, than your friends, things like that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I feel the same way when I look back on, especially like college years, who I was then, or like reflect on like my husband and I, because we met in college. We'll talk about, you know, our college years and we're like, who were those people? How did we survive? But I also think like I needed that time in my life because like I would not be the person I am today if I did not have those like messy years of self-discovery, of making mistakes, like K10 said. But yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, you all have, well, at least the Kristens have seen some of my, you know, cringy Facebook statuses from.
Oh my God, y'all. They are.
We've heard some of the cringy stories and they're my favorite.
Yeah, and that is not going to be shared.
That is not a topic, but I will internally think about them and giggle.
But yeah, I mean, it like
so good.
There is so much that is hard and messy about this time period, but I also think there's so much positive that can come of it. At least that's how I feel. Like when I reflect back on that 18 to 25 in my life, that it definitely set me up for who I am today.
I think I always heard, like when I was an undergrad, from a lot of people that are like, these are the best years of your life. And like, now being like beyond it, it's like, I can, this is again, take it for what it's worth from an old timer like me. Certain aspects will live in a nostalgic glow of that time, but do not for a minute think that it's all downhill, because in so many ways my life is astronomically better than when I was 22 years old. But there was a like impulsive freedom that I think a lot of people look at nostalgically of like, I just freaking was up all the time and ate pizza, and again, the privilege in this, of course, but I think that's an aspect that people are referring to. Like, you don't have responsibilities and all this. But I still work part-time jobs. I had to pay for stuff as well. But there are aspects of every chapter of your life, from what I've learned, that like are kind of like, I don't know how to say it. They're highlighted in an era or a chapter, and it might look different in another. But it's not to say, it's like, I think in so many ways your 30s are more peaceful. And I feel more grounded. Yes. Again, jump in and whatever. But I just remember hearing that a lot when I was 22. Of like, this is it. These are the best years.
Justin's just enjoying being in his late 30s playing pickleball.
You already know. Listen, you already know.
I agree with that though. Like I'm 31 and honestly, like my 30s so far have been way better because like, yes, don't get me wrong. There was something to be said about doing all the things I did in college. And there were things, and I was like, no, we're not going there. But doing all those things and having all that fun and not giving a crap. But
yeah, I woke up in many ditches, if we're just going to be real. Yeah, just like no clue where I was going, what I was doing.
Fields and cars that I got into. I'm like, but I think that plays, like, I was sitting here, I was tapping my forehead. I was like, oh, it's because my brain wasn't developed and couldn't think of consequences.
A frontal lobe.
But like in my 30s, like I'm definitely not as fun as I was at 21.
You're still fun.
You're definitely still fun. I hope that you know
sometimes.
That. You're chaotic but fun.
But I think that I just think it's one of those things that I think because my frontal lobe is developed, it makes experiences that much better.
It's so weird. I have such mixed emotions about it because I'm probably the most confident that I've ever been, but I don't take nearly as many risks as I used to. Because I don't know what it is. Like back then, Kristen, if you asked me to go skydiving, she's trying to get me to go skydiving. I'm not doing it. But back then, 25-year-old Kristen, I would have been like, time and place, I'll be there.
You're going skydiving.
Now.
It's happening.
No.
At 33 and a half, I'm like, oh, I got a lot to lose.
No, I got a mortgage over here.
I got a mortgage. I got 2 dogs who rely on me. I don't have kids, but like, who's going to feed them? Like
our group members need to all Venmo us $1 so that I can take K10 skydiving, and she cannot talk herself out of it.
That sounds awful.
I feel like Justin and I are voting against you taking K10 skydiving.
Okay. How about this? I'll think about it.
Wow.
No.
I'm not saying yes. I'm going to be open to the experience, but I need to think about it.
That's like the maybe that parents give their kids when they really mean no.
Well, it's not a fuck yes and it's not a no. It's like an in between. You know what I mean? But in emerging adulthood, it would have been an absolute, oh my gosh, yes. But I think back then it was because I was looking at all the opportunity that I had and I'm like, oh, why not? Why not? Why not? And not really thinking too far into the consequences. But some of my friends in my friend group were very much like that. So not to say that everybody doesn't think about the consequences in emerging adulthood. I think it just depends on the circumstances.
Before we transition, I just want to know, did you have more of a stress response like at 25 classic quarter life crisis or at 30?
30.
So the reason I'm laughing, this is not funny at all.
What's so funny?
So I joke that my quarter life crisis was getting married because I got married at 24.
I mean,
I joke that with my husband. I mean, and we joke that his quarter life crisis was proposing to me because he proposed at 25. We were engaged because I was in grad school. We were engaged for like 2.5 years. But yeah, so we joke. No, 25 was, I think, worse for me just because I got married and then I started my PhD program. So it was like all this change. Literally got married in June.
That's a
started
lot.
PhD program in August, turned 25 that August. 30, I was looking forward to. Like, I was like, I cannot
can't wait to get there.
Wait.
I'm fucking
like
ready.
The 13 going on 30.
Yeah.
With my sweater.
Got my little
side note. This is unrelated, but Justin, because you said sweater on, I had a doctor in the hospital recently tell me that he can always tell it's me walking without seeing my face because I have a uniform of a cardigan.
Jess, stop doing that to us as a profession, please. I'm doing it right now.
We're nominating you for Queer Eye. You're going on.
You have. Oh my god!
Yeah.
Jess would love it.
I will say, my quarter life crisis was having a baby.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I got pregnant when I was 25. I had him when I was 26, but that was, you know, it was hilarious because I literally talked about having a quarter life crisis and then, whoops.
There you go.
Let's make it a true crisis.
Welcome.
And I would say, like I said, like I embraced my 30s I'm embracing my 30s with open arms. I got I joke. I'm like, I got money. I got means.
Yeah.
I got
That's right.
good
Did
choices.
you say means or memes?
Both.
Both. Okay.
Money and memes.
Money and memes.
The two currencies of 2023.
And now I got threads.
Now
And
threads.
Yeah,
they're
threads.
threads.
I wish
You know
that
what
could be
else
the
we
title
got?
of this episode.
Oh,
We got a Google Scholar.
Google Scholar.
Short.
Is it on threads?
Let's go. It is not. It's
Will be
actually
soon.
a much, yes, we can put it on threads. We can start a thread about this journal article. It's actually a much more serious topic than how we just ended, but research. So one thing we didn't touch on with regard to emerging adulthood is the increased risk of intimate partner violence, especially for women in that age group. So my question I'm going to pose to you is, how do you think, or do you think, because you might not think this way, that race and sexual orientation play a role in intimate partner violence among women in emerging adulthood?
oh. I have so many knee-jerk reactions, but like, I don't know if they're right. I feel like women, minority women in heterosexual relationships are at higher risk.
Okay.
I'm making a total guess. I don't know though.
Yeah. I don't know, because I think of I definitely think of minorities across the board and think of society as pinching and pressuring and how it may come out in other ways because of society. Like it's really societal pressure that's weighing on both of you, and that's creating that's my guess. So more on the minority sense, and it's because of society.
Okay. Any thoughts, KBI? Or you want me to just go to
I feel like
some
it's a trick
findings?
question.
Okay.
I felt that same way. And I was like, I'm just going to respond with my thoughts.
Yeah. So the article is by Pittman and colleagues, and I'm just going to highlight, this article had so many findings, but I'm going to highlight a few of them. So they surveyed 9,435 adult women. So it was a very large sample size.
Huge.
Jeez.
Across the board, 80% endorsed emotional, physical, or sexual violence over the previous 12 months, with emotional abuse being the most reported form of abuse, followed by sexual, then physical. Women of color had more than a 64% increased risk of experiencing physical, intimate partner violence compared to white women. And then queer women experienced significantly greater risk of emotional, physical, and sexual intimate partner violence than their heterosexual counterparts.
Now that you say it out loud, it makes sense though.
Because if you're being oppressed, if you're being marginalized, you're being pinched by society, where is it going to start to show itself? And why wouldn't it show itself in the closest relationships you have?
Of course. Yeah. That's so wild. The last time I was at the ER, I went to the ER probably in March. You guys know I have a medical issue going on. So when I went, one of the first questions they said to me was, are you anxious right now? And I'm like, absolutely. I'm in the ER. Like, who wouldn't be? And then the second one was, are you safe at home? And I was like, that was the first time somebody asked me that question. And I was like, yeah, but if I wasn't safe at home, that would have been an opportunity, I guess, for me to kind of like get resources or something, but so interesting, those findings. Wow.
Yeah. Like I said, there's way more. Obviously, as always, we'll post the link, but those were some that really stood out to me. But yeah, I mean, 80% overall. And then you add any marginalized status and it increases.
Wow.
That's why systemic approaches are so critical to any intervention. As if y'all had just spoken about that last week. Good bridging Google Scholar short from one app to the next. That's Jess.
Know what else is a good bridge before our listener questions? The polls.
We gotta.
You know what? Let her go. There was nothing there for her.
We didn't set her up at all for that one.
I literally had nothing.
Sometimes we do really good setups, and sometimes we just were like flounder.
They're awful.
Jess is on Naked and Afraid with like no resources, and we're like watching from our homes, like, why aren't you cooking the fish? And she's like, I have no fish to cook. Like,
turn on the oven.
So dumb. Why would you bring
I don't
that
know how to
knife
use
and
an
not
oven.
that?
It doesn't exist.
She was never taught how to use it. Never taught. So this week I was in charge of the polls. And so a couple of them we had. So the first poll that we had is just to kind of gauge an idea of what our group members were. And it just was, are you an emerging adult? And it was either yes, I am. I'm younger than 18 or I'm older than 25. What do you think? Ooh. What do you think our followers fall?
42% emerging adult.
36% emerging adult.
1% emerging. I have no idea. You guys are too close.
So 69% of our followers are older than 25.
Okay.
So 69. Okay. So how many are emerging adults?
28% are emerging adults.
Okay. I thought you were going to say that percentage was emerging adult. I was going to be like, wow. Okay.
Wow.
And then 3% are younger than 18.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is going to be a good episode for you guys to listen to. You 3%. As well as everybody else listening.
We don't want to.
It's going to be great for
we don't want to out anybody, but you're welcome here.
So, out of the following, what do you find the hardest about being an emerging adult? Or if you are older than that, what did you find the hardest? And it was either forming my identity, having to be self-sufficient, needing to plan for my life ahead, or instability with so many changes happening. What do you think was the most popular?
The last one, yeah, for
last
sure.
one.
I'm going to be different and say planning for life ahead, but...
So the most popular was the instability of everything changing, with forming my identity coming in a close second.
Okay.
And then needing to plan for my life ahead, and with the last one being having to be self-sufficient.
Interesting.
Only 11%. So.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
The next question is, did you feel like you had support during those years? It was either yes, I did or do. No, I didn't or don't. I could have had more, or I'm not there yet.
I could have had more.
I could have had more.
Yeah.
So 47% of our followers said they could have had more support, which makes complete sense.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then we asked an open-ended question. It says, what's one thing you wish you would have known during this time? And let's read some of the answers. That I'd find my place in the world, but it'd take time and working out to figure out what's important. Adults don't have it all figured out. They just learn to care about people's opinions less.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
I like that.
Oh.
Teen movies lie. You don't have to have your shit together, and people do love you.
I love that.
That life would be so very different than what I expected, but it's still fucking awesome.
Okay.
Oh.
It's okay to do things, to figure things out imperfectly. Sorry, there are some that I can't say on the podcast, and I'm like, oh, I can't say that one out loud.
I thought you were going to say you can't say it because you're going to cry.
No, I can't say it out loud because I'm like, oh, that would make this double explicit. Honey, the good old saying, it's okay not to be okay. Everyone's timeline is different. There's no specific ages or goals. Literally, no one knows what they're doing. It's not just you.
I love that.
Okay, I'm going to end it on this one because I feel like this sums up my 20s. Call maintenance. Don't fix it yourself.
Oh my God, I love that. Yeah.
There's a lot of truth in that. There's a lot of truth. But you will wait for maintenance. You will wait
like 12 years.
Yeah, 3 to 5 business days at least.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll be there Tuesday between 12 and 2, and then it's Thursday at 8 p.m. And you're like, why is somebody knocking on my door?
What?
But I've watched some YouTube videos and thought I could do the task, and definitely
I'm like, I just made this 10 times worse.
I've been there, done that. Popcorn stealing. I'll tell that story another day.
Yeah, because I've rented for the past 10 years, like literally. And anytime anything broke, I'd have to like hide all my pets and pretend like there was like a petless household. Like, when maintenance came in and I'm like, all right, I got to start doing this shit myself.
Fair.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to the group member questions. Oh, yeah. Good transition. Let's do it.
Peyton's like, I'm not even trying to transition. Let's just go.
I don't even know how. I'm on that island.
I'm excited to hear what everybody wants to know for this.
Literally. Yeah. When I was looking through the questions, it like, I really took time to like really think about these because I just feel like that time is so, I don't know, it's just so transitional. So I was trying to like put myself back there and I was really feeling the questions and I'm sure you guys will too. So let's get to some of your questions. We love your input and look forward to your questions each week. And I just want to give a really, really brief reminder. Some of these questions have been summarized to preserve your anonymity. We care about your privacy. So without further ado, let's hit the first question. So Katie from North Carolina, she said, okay, this sounds dramatic, but in all seriousness, how do people survive this phase of life? Absolutely everything is a struggle. It's exhausting and nonstop, and it feels like nothing is ever going to stabilize. What do y'all think?
My response was you just do, but that's not really insightful.
But it's kind of like you just like, I remember being in that phase and it was like, I just have to do the next best thing. Mm-hmm. I just have to wake up and do the next best thing that's going to get me to the next day. Mm-hmm. And eventually the hope is that, at least I can speak for myself, that it does level itself out. But I remember being in the thralls of life and being like, oh God, this is bad.
I remember the area I felt that the most, like the instability for me, was career, because I had worked a zillion part-time jobs since the age of technically 12, because I first worked with my dad, but really 13. And I just felt like I was always working, always pushing myself. And I'm like, yo, when does this ever not feel like I'm juggling 20 things at once? Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that's like, when you look back, you can see it, but when you're in the midst of it, you don't, is like, you don't have to know what you want to do, but you have to go down a path far enough to kind of be able to look across the summit. Like you have to climb far enough down any path just to be like, oh, look, I'm higher now, and this height has brought me stability financially, or maybe in hours, or maybe in other opportunities. But like in the beginning, it just feels like I have no skills, I have no experience, I have no mastery. And it's like, I think of my journey, through school and working in research labs. Like I'm sure our journeys were sort of similar, but you have to go down something long enough to gain experience to earn like a stable income. Mm-hmm. So and that was the thing that was stressing me out the most, of like, when you work a million part-time jobs, you're like, how do I ever get something that's going to feel more full-time and stable?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Katie, I think personally, I have a little bit of a different perspective. I think like the chaos might not stop. Maybe in intensity it does, but you get really good about like rolling with stuff over time. Like you just develop this like inner peace and saying like, okay, I don't really know what's next. Kind of like what Justin's saying, like get on that path and try to figure it out. But it's okay to not know. And I think the more that you're able to lean into that and see it as a transition rather than seeing it as a detriment, the better. But not everybody has that privilege either. It does feel like a weird time.
The only thing I want to add, and I know not everybody has a great social support network, but my social support network is definitely what helped me get through that. My partner, my close college friends, even my family during that time really helped. And especially if you have other people similar age that are going through it with you, like if you feel comfortable, be honest and have conversations about the chaos, how it feels like nothing is ever going to stabilize. It's exhausting. Obviously, we're a mental health podcast. If therapy is accessible to you, therapy can help with these things. If you are in a place where, like, say, you're in college counseling centers, things like that, there are cheaper ways to access therapy. But for me, it was really my social support system that helped me get through.
That's amazing. Yeah, relying on your friends and family is a really good one. Next question from Anonymous. Do you think there's a huge correlation between having a difficult transition into adulthood and mental distress? I thought this question was really interesting because I hadn't thought about it before.
I think so.
I would assume yes. Like if you're having difficulties with the transition, it's going to, and I think it's bidirectional. If you're having difficulty with the transition, you're more likely to experience mental distress. But if you're experiencing mental distress while transitioning into that stage of life, it's probably going to make aspects of that difficult as well.
Yeah. And so, again, not all stress is bad stress, as we've talked about in previous episodes. But like if we're defining what would make a difficult transition and you're like, not a solid career outlook, not knowing what you want to do, not a great social support network, or, not close family. Like when you start like breaking down into what aspects this would look like, I think for sure it creates more distress and unease. But then things can stabilize. Friendship groups, social connection, career educate, all these things can stabilize. But yeah, sometimes that transition, it can feel like I don't have a solid foundation in many areas right now. And there were times in my 20s where I felt that.
I felt that too. Yeah. All right. So I don't think this is the person's real name, but they got a kick out of it. Tidbits from Utah said, I feel like I've gained and lost some really intense relationships these past few years, both romantic and platonic. What perspective would you give on how to let people you love move on from you? And how do you move on from people that you've outgrown? I know we talked about this a little bit before, without feeling guilty or abandoned. Love you guys to bits. You're a reprieve from the chaotic whirlwind of life. And I'm so grateful I found y'all. Oh my God. That's so sweet. Any additional thoughts?
I think that there's a piece that there's okay to have those feelings. It's always, I think the concern always comes in is the duration and the intensity of those feelings and the impact that those have long term. Like you're allowed to feel upset or hurt if someone distances themselves from you. You're allowed to feel upset or even hurt if you have to distance yourself from someone. But sometimes it does happen. And I think that's sometimes one of the harder things about growing up is when you do outgrow in whatever way that is.
I relate to this question a lot because like I already shared, I moved 1,000 miles away for college. I came back the summer after my freshman year, and that's the only summer I came back because I had this stark realization I was very different than my friends who all stayed local. Wow. And that was really hard. It was a really hard summer for me. Like we still hung out and everything, but I just realized like how different my experience going off to college in the South versus my friends who pretty much stayed local and still hung out with each other on weekends and things like that. And for me, it was a lot of accepting that we are different people now. And it doesn't mean like they're bad people or I'm a bad person. We're just different. And it was a hard summer, and my recognition of having to let them go in the capacity that we were friends before, because I mean, we were still friendly, but just like not as close, was that I just felt like a stranger and different. And I didn't want to feel that way around my friends. And I had made great friends in college, and it was sad. Like I said, there was no big like friendship breakup or anything like that, but it was a more distancing. And I did definitely have to grieve that. And it's okay to feel guilty. It's okay to feel abandoned, kind of like KBI was saying. But the recognition that maybe these people are not serving you in the way they once did. And that's okay. That doesn't mean the time that you all had together was wasted in any means. It doesn't mean that the memories that you reflect back on aren't still positive, things like that. It's just, you're different. And I feel like and you all can disagree with me, that 18 to 25 period, at least for me, was a lot of changing friendships. I lost a lot of my best friends, made some really, really great friends. And then you go into like, you know, we all went to grad school, so it's kind of different. We were still in like this manufactured, like forced friendship, prolonged schooling. But then you go into like adulthood, and that's a whole different ballgame when it comes to friendships. At least it has been for me. But, you know, I would just kind of reflect on, you know, why do you feel like they need to move on or you need to let them go? Because there's a reason. And if you can reflect on that and kind of work through that acceptance and know that you can let someone go and still care for them and love them.
The duality of life. Yeah. You could let them go and still love them from afar. That's what I always say. We got a couple of questions on loneliness, which I thought was really good because I felt a lot of that during this time. So the first one was from Anonymous. As a 25-year-old who's still figuring life out and myself out, is it normal to feel lonely all the time? When does that feeling go away? And then Karen from Slovakia had a similar question. She said, how can a person with a lot of childhood trauma and no family find their identity and place around this age? I'm sure there's plenty of us who escaped horrible childhoods, and it just feels lonely and confusing out there. I have so many thoughts, but the first thought that comes to mind is what Jess said before. If you have anybody in your life, even if they're like a coworker, family member, friend, even if you're not able to talk about these things with them, you could always try to talk around it, you know, and try to maintain connection in some other way. Another thought is to try to engage with your hobbies and do the things that you enjoy. And then friends might, you know, come to you along the way. But, for me, it felt really confusing around that time because I had a lot of trauma growing up, I felt like so far behind my peers just because of dealing with all that stuff. So I always felt like kind of an outcast in a way. But what I did to kind of compensate for that was I tried to engage as best I could, and just try to pretend like, hey, I'm good. And then as you form friendships, it's like a little easier. But that feeling of loneliness, I just want to validate, like I felt that a lot. I don't have really good advice, but I did feel it. All right. Next questions. So we had a lot of questions about managing parent relationships, which I wasn't expecting this. And I thought these were really good questions too. So Peyton from Louisiana said, I'm an emerging adult and I have been struggling with my relationship with my parents. They're very opinionated and sometimes judgmental of my life decisions. How do I set clear boundaries while also respecting them as my parents?
So my knee-jerk reaction is just because you set boundaries doesn't mean you're disrespecting them as your parents. If you're actually setting boundaries and not like making demands. So for example, like, you know, if you continue to talk to me or judge me in this way, I'm not showing up versus like, you can't judge X, Y, or Z, because that's the first one's a boundary. The second one is a demand. But boundaries aren't disrespectful. Boundaries are you protecting your mental health, well-being. And maybe, I don't know what your relationship previously was like with your parents. I know you said you're struggling now, but sometimes it's having those hard conversations of, you know, I want to maintain a relationship with you, and you need to understand that I am, you know, an adult or whatever phase of life of whatever, I guess, the areas of struggles are. And, you know, these are the concerns I'm having. These are my boundaries. And I'm asking you to respect those boundaries. If you can't, I'm going to do, like, I don't know your situation, but going to do X, Y, and Z, but kind of like setting it out there that you want to have a relationship, but you're in a different phase of life. And I remember struggling with that a little bit, like balancing when I went home, being an adult, especially at college, like, and kind of doing my own thing, and then being under my parents' roof and having to like listen to their rules and being like, oh, and I don't know if that's your situation, but I just really wanted to highlight that you can set boundaries, and that just, it doesn't mean you're disrespecting your parents if the boundaries are clearly to protect you and your needs.
I love that. We had so many about parents and boundaries. So another person said, how do I protect my boundaries and my independence without hurting my parents? I think there's, like Jess is kind of highlighting, there is this feeling of like, I don't want to put up boundaries because they feel wrong or bad. Like I'm disrespecting somebody. And at the same time, I need these. And I think that's the hard part about boundaries. Kristen, you've talked about this so much about kind of setting hard limits and boundaries and the grief that kind of comes along with that too. Madison from Southern Maryland said, I just turned 18. How do I find my sense of identity, as well as how do I start going no contact and getting out of my house? Also, Team Candy Corn, love the pod.
She uses the same emojis as you, Kristen. Are you
I know.
Sure?
I'm pretty sure that's K10 in a nutshell. I
promise it wasn't me.
I think the idea of going no contact, right? There's steps to that. And the reality is if you're living with your parents, going no contact really isn't an option in that moment. But there are steps that you can take to move towards that as you begin to leave that. But I know, again, those boundaries, right? Boundaries exist so that I can continue the relationship with you. And it's really hard to do that, especially when you live with someone. I think when there's a difference between setting boundaries when you get to go home to your own apartment or your own home at night, and the boundaries that get set when you live with that person. Because at the end of the day, we also want to maintain safety. And I always go back to that. If you were to set this boundary, what is going to be the impact on your safety, whether it's physical or emotional or even living situation safety? There were times when I spent a very long time as a grown adult living with my mom where I wanted to set boundaries and I could not, because I knew if I set this boundary, I would not be the one who was chosen in that. And I would have to find somewhere else to live. And so I then, again, you go back to figuring out what can I do in this moment? Until I got the opportunity to leave and those boundaries became stricter. Those boundaries, because I had more power. I had more power in my corner because she wasn't going to kick me out. I had the power to, if she started yelling at me, to leave the situation. I could just go get in my car and leave, until it got to the point of the boundaries were not respected, to where I did make that choice to go no contact. And so that is really hard, to navigate that. Especially that's a common question. How do I go no contact while living at home? The truth is you just can't. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say can't, because absolute, I bet you there are someone, but it's very, 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 very difficult, and you just always have to maintain safety.
Definitely. And I think even pulling back from that a little bit, working with a lot of young adults, you're trying to weigh out consequences. If you live in their house, what's the consequence of you if you had to get kicked out? How would that make your life harder? What impact would that be on you? Could you financially, support yourself? It's the hardest thing to weigh those different things out. Some people are supported financially. Some parents are paying for food, or they're paying for college, or they're paying for different things. But having time and space away from your parents and family, I think, is good. And I think naturally happens. You form friendships, you hang out with people from work or school or whatever. But I guess I'm kind of with KBI of sometimes you're starting with boundaries, just investing your energy in your own life and letting things progress over time. But I've had this exact conversation with so many young adults of let's try to look down the road of consequences if we were either, whether you call it no contact or just totally not listening to your parents anymore, or ignoring whatever requests they have under their roof. It's important to weigh out what those consequences might be and how that may make your life harder. And again, that's a great place to process that in therapy or with somebody, because sometimes we don't think all the way through what that might look like if that relationship becomes more strained. And
I also think I remember I went to college and I was gone and I only came home every once in a while. But I think it's also important for us to, as emerging adults, to be mindful as well, because I can tell you that first summer that I came home from college, I will be transparent, and I was a little shit. My parents weren't going to tell me what to do. You're not going to tell me a curfew. I was out till 3 a.m. But it wasn't until I sat and was reflective, and I was like, my house was very, very tiny. If I came in stumbling, drunk, and beating around my house, I was waking up everybody in my house. Mm-hmm. And so there's also the piece of like understanding, like, are they asking me to be home by 10 because they're trying to control my life? Or are they asking me to be home by 10 because it's a Wednesday night and they have work the next morning?
Yeah, those are solid reflections.
And so like, that's something that I had to be reflective of in a lot of ways, and not, there were definitely times where it was more the controlling aspect, but I had to sit there and say, like, are they asking this because they just want to control me? Or are they asking this because they want me to be a respectful roommate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think go ahead, Justin.
You got it.
I was going to say it's usually a choice between two like unpleasant decisions, right? Yeah. Like go no contact, live in the same house, kind of awkward, or just kind of like be okay with certain things. Then, like Justin was saying, like get into your life in a different way, focus on certain things, therapy. And like KBI is saying, perfect. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
All right. Next question from Savannah from Michigan. Being an emerging adult, what is one way to begin to feel secure when you graduate college? I find that perfect job and move out. You're left feeling alone, like you don't know anything, wondering how I will ever make this work. Oh, I feel that in my soul.
Stay in graduate school forever. No, I'm just kidding.
That's what I did.
Yeah,
honestly,
in graduate school, like constantly obtain student loan debt.
That's literally what I did. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. Any thoughts? Any extra thoughts?
I mean, so the few things that stuck out to me, find that perfect job. Like, yes, some people will get a job in their field right out of undergrad, and it will be the perfect job. I would argue that the vast majority of people's first job out of undergrad is not the job that they're going to stay at forever.
No,
it's not your job.
So it doesn't have to be perfect. Kind of going back to something Justin said at the beginning of the podcast about like needing an entry-level job with 10 years experience. Like, yes, you want to like your job and enjoy it, but it is okay if you go into the mindset like, this is a job to get my feet on the ground for something that I want to do in the future. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's even okay. Like, I knew people that did this, that graduated college and they're like, I don't want to do a 9-to-5. I'm going to start, like, especially over the summer, like bartending or do something like, I don't know, more still in that like college scene and kind of go from there. As for moving out, really, that's up to you if you have the ability to do so and what that looks like. I mean, people do it differently. But I think a big thing would be you, Savannah, reflecting on like, what areas of your life do you feel like would give you the sense of security most? Is it like locking in a job? Yeah. Even if that means like, hey, I'm still living with my guardians at home because it's really close, or like I can't afford to move out yet. Or would you rather feel secure in like, let me live in an apartment with a couple of my friends and kind of gain independence that way, even if I'm working a job that is not necessarily perfect or my dream job? Or is it something else? Is it, I want to save up and travel for a couple months to kind of find who I am and things like that. And I think the answer is going to be different for everyone. But if security is what you're searching for, I would encourage you to reflect on like, what does that look like for you and what steps could you take to move towards there? Also, maybe this is Debbie Downer. I would argue like most 21, 22, 23-year-olds do not feel super secure when they graduate college.
No.
I felt like a hot mess, like straight up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think the hardest thing not to do is get frozen. It's easy for me to say, because I struggle with perfectionism still. There definitely is no perfect job. I don't think it exists. There's pros and cons to everything. But I think when you're at that age and you're out of college, I am a believer, like you need to move forward down a path. And the people I've worked with, and I remember feeling it as well and seeing it in some friends, if you get frozen sort of doing nothing, it's hard. Because a lot of times those people are thinking that there's a right path. There is a perfect thing. I'll know when I know. Where I'm like, I'm more of the mindset, and again, take this for what it's worth, that you can only know by collecting the experiences. Like, yeah, maybe you're unsure about the internship. Maybe this job, you're like, I don't know if I want to be at it more than a year or two. You don't have to know. You really don't. So I just encourage you to like start down a path and it will lead somewhere. Even if the place that leads you is after 8 months or a year or 6 months, or whatever, that you're like, I didn't like that. What didn't you like? What wasn't a good fit? You learned something, but don't minimize that. I just think it's hard to learn anything if you're frozen in place. And at times we will feel that, but go down some direction, something.
Again, I think it goes back to making what is the next best choice that I can make.
Love it. Love it.
Like just to get me to tomorrow.
Yeah. No, totally. Think about all of your first jobs out of your undergrad. Did you think that was your dream job?
Hell no.
Fuck no. Absolutely not. Like,
no,
absolutely not. No.
No.
I knew it the minute I applied. Like I was like hitting the app. I was applying and I was like, this ain't it. I did it anyway. And then I figured out what I wanted to, you like Justin's saying, I feel like you figure it out as you go. But I think it's hard to take risks though, too, at that age, because like you're saying, like you just feel like you have to pick a path and you're going to be on that path your whole life. Like life comes in cycles too. All of us have had multiple jobs, multiple employments, it's just part of it, I think.
To ease some things, when I graduated undergrad, I went straight to grad school. So I didn't really have, other than like a part-time, like I moved to Maine, I worked at CVS. But when I graduated grad school, I took a job and I was there for 13 days.
Hell yeah.
Wow.
Solid 13.
So 13 days, and was like, I literally sent the email and I was like, hey, I don't think this job is for me. I am more than happy to finish out 2 weeks notice. But I just don't, I was like, but I'm also okay if we don't want to do that either.
Oh my God.
13 days. Impressive.
I'm trying to think of my shortest job. I worked for, this was like right before my undergrad. I think this was in high school. I worked at a grocery store and I got there and I was like, saying it, can't do it. Can't do it. 3 days. Dude, 3 days. And I was like, you know what? I can't do it. And I ended up working somewhere else, but you just know if it's not for you and you know if it's going to be the experience for you. And if it's not, it's not. It's okay to let go and move on to something else too, 13 days. That's so funny, KB.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not finished. I'll finish it out, but if I don't need to, bye.
Yep. Mercy from New York said, what was one thing that you wish you knew after graduating undergrad? And for reference, she's going into grad school for mental health counseling. So one thing that you wish you knew after undergrad, after you graduated?
You don't have to take out every ounce of student loans that they give you if you don't have to.
Oh, I wish I knew that.
Honestly, like that is like the one thing. If I, out of everything that I have learned in life, I'm like, I want to go back to 18-year-old Kristen and be like, only take what you need. You don't need that extra $7,000 that you're going to blow.
But do you?
No, I didn't.
For the memories.
No, because I just blew it on stupid shit. But I'm like, that is mine.
It's okay to still not have it figured out. When I graduated undergrad, I was still in EMT, and then got my master's. I was still in EMT. So I felt like I was in this crossroads of like going for psychology, but then like kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And I felt guilty about that. And I just really didn't know where my life was going. And I think it's okay to not know. And I just wish I had more people in my life to tell me that, instead of saying, make a choice. You know, I just really had no idea what I wanted to do. I mean, up until getting into my doctorate program, I think it was like 2 years in, I'm like, yeah, this is probably good. Like that's at that point I knew. Like after undergrad, I didn't, and that's okay.
I think knowing, especially as you push through young adulthood and you do get more stability, your career is just one aspect of your life. But when you're in school, I see you're going to grad school, it feels like it's all your life. You know, it feels hard to visit people. It feels hard to go anywhere. You have no money. Like there's so many different aspects, and there's awesome things about grad school too. Trust me. But as you get out of grad school and you're working and you're like a young professional, early career professional, whatever, that bubble can get like smaller. Like mental health isn't everything about my life anymore. And I love my career. I love content creation, but there's so many other aspects of me and my life that create more harmony. And that in different chapters in your life, there's just less harmony because you're trying to cultivate an expertise. So if it feels like a lot, I think it is a lot. I think a lot of people struggle when like you eat, drink, sleep, mental health, or anything you might go to grad school for. Like there starts to be a part of you like, do I love it that much? But I could go on about this, but I think there's certain aspects of that chapter that are just overwhelming.
Oh yeah.
I think the biggest thing I would tell my 21-year-old self is life doesn't always go as planned, and that's okay. Because like if you ask 21-year-old me, I mean, I was going to grad school too, like what my life would look like. And yes, I still ended up getting my PhD in clinical psychology, and I probably shared this on the podcast. Like my goal was to go into academia, or even just like where I thought I wanted to go to grad school versus where I ended up. And then even in grad school, like I didn't get my first choice internship match. I matched with my third, which is still great.
It's pretty good.
But it ended up being exactly what I need. Like, but I mean, and this probably shocks nobody ever that I am such a planner, and like
I'm just picturing when you were applying to internship, those who are in a clinical psychology program or clinical psychologists can relate to this. You probably had an Excel worksheet.
I did. I had an Excel spreadsheet. I had rankings of each thing. It's like ranking by location, ranking by like feel, ranking by like rotations, and
so surprised.
And then I had like a coding system.
Did you have a color coded?
No, it wasn't color coded. It like I had a ranking system by like.
I got you.
Yeah, and then
she created her own algorithm.
I did. Yeah. But even like I didn't get into a PhD program the first time, so I took a year off between my master's and PhD, and that was probably the best year that could have for me because I worked, I got married, I like got to be a 24-year-old because I was still so young. Yeah. But yeah, 21-year-old me definitely graduated with a plan, and I definitely, not all things went as planned, and that's okay because I wouldn't change it.
Totally.
Perspective matters too.
Yeah.
Like you could look at that year and be like, oh my God, I'm so behind. Or you could look at that year and be like, I was able to experience things, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, life doesn't go as planned.
21-year-old us would never think that we were sitting here on a podcast.
Oh yeah. No.
I never thought, I'm going to be very dark and real. I never thought I'd make it to 30. Like I never even thought like it was going to happen because I was so chaotic growing up. My parents are like, wow, you made it. Wow. Holy shit. You know what I mean? Like, but I do think like if you're stuck in emerging adulthood and you're thinking like, I don't know what my life is going to bring, it's most likely not going to be what you kind of think it's going to be. There's going to be things along the way that might shock you, that might help you, that might hurt you, all those things. And not to say that all those things are going to make you a better person. Sometimes they just happen and they're just really shitty, you know, and that's okay. But I do think that it's okay to have a plan and that plan to not go as planned and then to have other things happen instead. It just creates, it's character development, you know?
I love how profound all three of you are. And I'm like, student loan debt.
But that's sound advice though.
That's so real.
It's so real.
Y'all are like, let's do eloquent explanations. And I'm like, stop taking money out.
That's actually really practical advice. I have $400K in student loan debt. Like, I have a mortgage. I have a house now, but I had a mortgage with no house for so long. I wish somebody would have told me that when I was younger. So solid advice. Okay. Next one. I lost my place. Give me a second. Okay. Anonymous from the Midwest. I wonder if you're in Kansas City or Ohio. I feel like Ohio's not the Midwest, but it is.
It is.
I'm joking.
No, it is. Yeah,
I know. I feel like the pandemic years didn't quote unquote count. I'm 2 years behind where I should be for my age in terms of career decisions, maturity, moving out, romantic relationships. Is this a broader experience or is it just me? How do I go about catching up?
Yeah,
it's everybody.
Yeah, there's no catching up, but I do want to validate that. I think the pandemic years, like, I feel like that even for like my mid 30s vanished. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that that's a sensitive time period, but I have a lot of sympathy for people who lost the last 2 years of high school and lost the jump start into, I'm putting lost in quotes because there's things you learned about yourself still, and there's still things you gained. But I have a lot of sympathy for the pandemic hitting at certain transitional times for sure. But you're still not, there's no place to catch up to. And I know you'll be like, well, I don't know my job, or I have no, you said romantic relationship and moving out and all these things. You'll collect those experiences. Even pre-pandemic, we all knew people at all the varying things. We knew people who lived at home. We knew people who had never been in a romantic relationship. We knew people who had only been in one. We knew all the people still existed before the pandemic. And this myth around that someone could be ahead or behind. And again, the longer you're privileged to live, you realize that was all bullshit.
It's like, such bullshit.
There's people starting over at 40. They got divorced. They lost their job. You know, they already, which is crazy to believe, but it does. They already had a kid who left the home now and is 18. There's people quote unquote, starting over at all ages and periods of time. So I don't want you to believe that you're like, oh, I caught up. You'll discover things about yourself. But if it's always in comparison, like we've talked about, then that will plague you. And that's a whole different thing to work on, is to start realizing it's just you with you. It's not about anybody else.
Yeah, you're basing your timeline on societal standards that are technically arbitrary, you know?
Right.
I don't have kids. Most of my friends do. I'm in my mid 30s, and most people will tell me, when are you going to have kids? Or, you know, when are you catching up, you know, to have kids? And I'm like, I don't really know. You know what I mean? Like, it's never crossed my mind. I don't know if I can't, like all those things, you know, but do I feel like I'm behind in that sense? I could. Do I feel like it's just maybe not in the cards for me? Yeah, perhaps. And that's okay. You know, totally okay. It doesn't mean I'm any less of a person, but I think if I'm comparing to maybe just like my friends who have kids, of course I'm behind, you know, if I'm using that as a statistic. But if I use it me versus me, I'm like, oh, I'm right where I should be. I'm totally cool, you know. And the same goes for school, transitions, emerging adulthood, all those things. Because nobody really, I don't know, it took me a long time to realize this, like nobody really has it figured out. Like there's no right way to live life at all. Like, and there shouldn't be, because if you think about it from an existential standpoint, like there's no right way to live unless you're doing like crime. I mean, that's different, you know, but if you're engaging in crime like Jess, like, gosh, she has a record. But, you know,
you would never think it. You would never think it, but it's always,
it's always there. It's looming. Yeah.
But I think that's like the only person, like, you know, to be focused on is you. Because if you, like you said, like if you focus on anybody else, you're going to be behind. And also knowing, like, you never know what life is going to throw out at you. I don't talk about this often, but if you look at my living situation, I live in an attic. I live in the attic of my in-laws' house. And like, I'm 31 and I've lived with them now for the last 4.5 years. And would I be behind because at this time in my life, I should have a house while I have a kid? Yeah, you could say that. But, you know, it's also looking at what are the upsides. Like, man, I'm saving lots of money not having a house.
Saving so much money.
Like I'm able to pay my rent to them, but I'm able to pocket a ton of money to do that down payment for a house. So maybe I'm not as in debt.
I see space over your left shoulder from my bed, so I don't.
I'm coming over. Sleeping over.
I already have my 5-year-old who runs upstairs and wakes me up screaming in my face. The last thing that I need is Justin in my space with his extroverted ass.
Just to be screeching.
Play pickleball.
Yeah.
Justin, this is the real reason why we haven't invited you on any sort of trips. We know that you would be the alarm clock. We know you would be the alarm clock for sure.
Loud. I wish y'all could hear me on Threads. I was screaming. I'm
just waiting for when we all get together and we all travel to Justin's house.
I'm sleeping over.
We get to wake him up.
But there has to be a noise machine, a fan, really, it has to be 68 degrees and then at least water and stuff.
You'd be like, why do all your neighbors wear earmuffs as they're coming and going and look a little shaken? I'm like, there's just an echo. I don't know where it's coming from either, but just protecting their ears. I don't think Jess would last a day. Jess has never been around me in person, but
No.
I barely lasted the one day.
I think I don't know. I feel like meeting Justin in real life made me appreciate you even more because of we missed the Uber and that whole, we had a chance to create collective experience together. And I'm like, this is so fun. Without that, I probably think you're just, loud and annoying. I'm kidding. I'm joking.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, I'm messing with you.
Literally.
I don't have a good transition for the outro.
Fuck. I was trying to think of one.
What's not loud and annoying? It is annoying that we have to end the podcast.
Justin, I didn't mean to say that.
But I'm doing the outro, so it's not going to be loud. But it is.
Is there more of a yin and yang between you and
the outro? Just scream it.
I want to hear your best Justin outro.
Wait. Hold on. Wait. Really quick. You guys are all emos, so y'all could scream, right? Why aren't you using? Come on. You guys aren't even achieving your full potential.
Just channel your internal Devil Wears Prada.
I'm more just...
Channel your inner Justin. You have it in you.
I've literally never seen that movie.
Meryl Streep.
Yeah. I mean, I know what it is. I've never seen it.
Wait, are you talking about the Devil Wears... I'm talking about the band.
Oh.
Not the movie.
Oh. We were talking about the movie.
This is the worst.
Wow, the worst emo kids on the planet right now.
We're from different eras.
There's a band called Devil Wears Prada? Hold on.
Yeah.
I'm sure if you Google it, the movie
K10 is not going to like it. For any emo kid listening, K10 is going to listen to this and she's be like, what in the satanic hell?
IMDb, it's just the movie.
No,
band.
Devil Wears Prada band. Anyways.
All right, send me some stuff after.
Thank you all, group members, for joining for today's episode. Whether you're an emerging adult, were once an emerging adult, or will one day be an emerging adult, we hope you learned something today, took away some good reflections. As always, please rate, review, and subscribe, and share this episode with an emerging adult in your life that you think may benefit from hearing from it. Before we sign off for the week, we leave you with this reflection question. What is one piece of advice or encouragement you have for someone who is an emerging adult? So head over to our Instagram and then maybe Threads. Maybe we'll get a welcome to group therapy Threads up.
Read it up.
K10.
By next
Run it up.
And answer the questions so we can read them on next week's episode. And we will see you next week in group therapy. Bye.
I'm going to check Threads now. Bye, guys.
Peace.